if the question of are there AI-enabled attacks, I think the answer is absolutely. There are absolutely autonomous attack harnesses that are being put out there, and people are using them.
The Adversarial Podcast. Why you gotta be so adversarial? Adversarial. It's time to get adversarial.
Hey, Sunil. Good to see you as always on the Adversarial Podcast. Welcome.
Hey, Jerry. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, we're lacking Mario this week. Unfortunately, it's summer and there's a lot of travel, and we've done a pretty good job of aligning 3 different schedules for a long time, but it was just near impossible. And I'm the guilty party because I'm off on holiday starting tomorrow. So this is a special, only Sunil and Jerry short episode. And we will bring Mario back into the fold as soon as we're all back together again in a couple of weeks.
Oh, fudge.
Yeah, I know. We need some sound bites to just say, what the fudge? Mario, we miss you. We'll be back soon. Well, one of the reasons we want to jump in and do something anyway is because there's no shortage of headlines, and here we go. So let's launch right into it. One of the things that is like top of mind for us this week is I was about to say a really cool incident disclosure. I'll tell you, like in general, I think some of my favorite reading is when there's a really founder-led company where the founders understand what's going on in the nuts and bolts pretty closely, and then they have some kind of security intrusion or incident. And because the same person has the ability to pick how forthright they're going to be, the CEO in this case, who also understands all the details, then you get these amazing write-ups. Like Matthew Prince at Cloudflare, I think, is really well known for this. And in this case, it's out of HuggingFace, where they had a AI-related intrusion. And I think this is a watershed moment for a few reasons. Yes, Sunil?
Yeah, it's one of the few, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the only, but one of the few threat cases where they're publicizing or sharing details of a AI-driven attack. But what also makes this one particularly special is that they've shared details on how they've used their own autonomous AI agent system to defend as well. So this is, I think, one of the first write-ups that I've seen of AI attacking and AI defending.
Yeah. And, the defending is really important. And before we get into that, and something that comes to mind for me is, like I mentioned, you have the confluence, the Venn diagram overlap between being willing to talk about it and knowing what the hell you're talking about. And that's uncommon, in general with incident management and cyber. And what is a similar thing was like, if you wind back the clock 15 years, was kind of the not AI involved in the attack, but APTs. And if you remember, there was, I'd say, a wave where everything was blamed on APTs. And it was like, well, we had a breach, but it was an APT, so you can't blame us. And what can we do? I bet we're going to see some of that too. And I know this isn't the first time I've heard about AI involved in attacks, but this is exciting to me because when I read it, I actually believed it. And I'm not sure when I see that all the time. I mean, if you just use Claude while you're attacking someone of like, hey, can you spell check this email? Is that an AI powered attack the way a layperson would interpret it? So this one I think actually is. And we should talk a little bit about like, what would it take for you to read something, an incident report, and be like, oh yeah, this was AI.
Yeah.
involved.
I think so. From the attacker, or what they observe from the as a defender, there are a couple of characteristics I think we would look at and say, oh yeah, this is definitely not a human doing this. This is a machine doing it. So there's one perspective, which is if you see a certain activity that is just scripted, and you can tell that it's a script that's running, and it follows a certain fairly predictable pattern, or there's very little variation. Then you have what HuggingFace saw, which was the speed and scale of what appears to be a scripted attack, but with changes that are happening dynamically based on what's coming back, right? So
iterative attacking,
adjustments on the fly and at machine speed scale, which you wouldn't expect. A script will fail unless it's a really, really advanced script that has.
Yeah, you look at any logs for failed logins on an internet connected system. You see an example of what you're talking about, where it's just the same crap over and over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. And so I think this notion that they're observing this really rapid adjustment is what makes this more of an agentic attack rather than just simple automation that machine automation that does it at the speed that we're already accustomed to, but not of the kind of variations that I think HuggingFace saw.
Yeah, and what struck me was exactly examples of what you're talking about, which is iteration, pivoting, real-time pivoting. And they didn't give like a X per Y rate metric through this, but I got the feeling they're saying they saw enough volume that also tipped that off a little bit too, that there was something, if not just like sheer volume and brute force, more like the speed at which the pivots would happen.
That's right. Yeah. I think it was something like almost like 20,000 some events that happened in a relatively short period of time. That and again, that's not that many events in the grand scheme of things, but if that happens in a short period of time and you see clear evidence of pivoting or adjustments, then that strongly suggests that there's some sort of agentic harness behind the scenes that's guiding the actions of the agent.
Yeah, and as I read this, and by the way, my source on this was their blog, which was wonderful, and the press coverage I saw this basically just plagiarized their blog at best. Didn't have much other to say on that. But it did mention, which I thought is interesting. It mentioned exploits, and I say that's interesting because I think to the layperson or the common narrative is that exploits like CVE popping has a key role in the majority of intrusions that the world cares about. And I usually will kind of take the contrarian viewpoint and say, yeah, it's more likely account takeover and social engineering. And so therefore like literal mythos and more CVs aren't as big a deal because it has its place and it happens sometimes, but it's not massive. And here it's saying that there were a couple of exploits. It didn't use the term CVE, but I think it used the term vulnerability, which is interesting, and that they fixed those. So that implies that it's fixable. But what they didn't say was if there was like a 0-day devised through the iteration, or if it was more just hard to find, but yeah, this was a vulnerability. And if they had known about it, it would have been on their risk register and or fixed. So it's hard to know whether I don't think it's a 0-day live crafting, or that probably they wouldn't have been able to resist sharing that, I think. But it is pretty interesting that it was able to find an exploit and then pivot in lateral movement in the newer sense, not like machine to machine.
Yeah, but keep in mind, there's it could have been as simple as this. The agentic harness could have been, hey, I've been contracted out by HuggingFace to go attack the public-facing website, find a novel vulnerability, exploit it, and see how far you can get, right? And that's what it did, right? And so in many ways, that simple expression of go try to find a novel vulnerability, which means that there is no more than likely there was no existing CVE, presuming that HuggingFace has done its basic due diligence to look for the common sort of cruft that you would typically look for. But now you point an LLM at your public facing customer facing website to and then have an agent go find something. If you don't give it hey, please stop here, don't go further, just report on this and come back to me, versus go attack and find out what you can find, I think that's the difference that you'll see. I've done a ton of pen testing with these agents, but usually have it stop and say, give me a report before you go and act on anything. What I think happened here, what appears to be the case here, is it found it and then acted on it and kept going. And that's the nature of the agentic activity that I was referring to.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So like on the initial exploit, or maybe whether or not it's initial, on the exploit part of it, like, to be specific on it, because I remember it caught my eye and I just looked it back up again. What they said was it was a data set code execution path, or two of them actually, right? And I'm interpreting that as the product is designed so that people can upload data, let's say, but code. And lo and behold, that code gets included into a routine that will execute what's in there with more privilege than you would like for a user to have. So you upload some stuff and purportedly to have it analyzed, but really, or at least you're testing to see if it actually get executed. And it did in this case. And that was the vulnerability. So it could be so bespoke that it's not like CVE type material anyway. It could just be something very bespoke to HuggingFace. And then from there, it moved pretty quickly in the lateral movement. It's interesting with the prevalence of attack surface management, and I'm using that term broadly and inclusive of even red teaming, right? Like just look for the problems. With the prevalence of companies in that space that are pivoting to AI to automate all of this. Because, if you bought a Watchtower attack surface management or crowd bug bounty or a red team in the past, it was exactly like you said, whether it was manual or not, they'd get to a certain point and then you'd give them the green light and then they would say, oh, actually, it turns out it was a nothing burger, and you kind of iterate. And so the holy grail is to have things automatically pivot and go on and ultimately get results. And in the process of creating those benevolent products, you're going to probably have things like this happen by accident. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that at some point they say, my bad, sorry, kind of embarrassing, but one of your customers put you in as a vendor and we automatically crawled the vendors and kind of didn't guardrail ourselves and went off to the races, right? That could be something that comes out of this. We'll see.
Yeah, I think if hopefully those who are a bit more cautious and aren't just operating in YOLO mode will be a bit more conscientious about checking with a human before proceeding with actually attacking a system. And I think, again, this is the distinction I would make. I wouldn't be too surprised if an attacker actually scouted it out first and then said, okay, now I found the potential weaknesses, go, take it to its max. The other general point I would also make here is that there is a asymmetric advantage for defenders, for attackers here, which is one's ability to determine that a particular vulnerability and subsequent exploit does achieve the objective that you have or not is something that is easily verifiable by a machine. So that a machine can continue to iterate over and over again until it gets to the point that it has verified that, yes, this was exploitable. For defenders, it's not the asymmetry exists for defenders on the configuration end, which is, do I know that my environment is configured properly? That's a very verifiable thing. So I think there's a asymmetry that on both ends that we need to take advantage of, or rather the attackers are taking advantage of the asymmetry in easily verifying exploits. We need to somehow take advantage of easily verifying configuration and ensuring that configurations are solid as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost proving a negative versus proving a positive, and naturally proving negatives is a lot
Much
harder. And I could look at it as like restating that as like the success criteria are easier to define for the attacker, which is stole all the data, shut down the system, whatever, boom. I used to call it ringing the bell when we would do, what was that? Oh, those damn Gartner categories, breach and attack simulation, BAS, right? Maybe, who knows what it's called these days. But that was 10 years ago, right? It was, let's automate going in. And what we would say is like, we didn't just want to have like a test go in and then say whether or not there's vulnerabilities. We also wanted to test response. So we didn't want to tell the defenders that we're automating testing, and we wanted them to find it and not feel like, oh, it was just a stupid test, you wasted my time. So we wanted them to have to exercise the real run book and all of that. And at some point say, I found you. And that was us trying to like devise, so on the attacker, you ring the bell when you see the data come out or whatever. On the defender, you mentioned restoring the system to a known good state, which is never really perfect because you never really know that it was known good. And so we would say like, we would have some kind of token embedded in the attack string, whether it was in the data set or in a command or in a header. And we would have the good and benevolent processes of the defenders end up finding that if it was going to be there, and then that's their, it was the red team, and they put it in a little thing and it validates, yes, that's the token, you found us, and that sort of thing. Really hard. It requires a lot of, and that's just for testing. In the wild, you're right, it's very hard.
I should also clarify something. It's not necessarily, I'm not suggesting a known secure state. but just simply a known good state. So when I was at
Okay.
Bank of America, I ran an experiment to see if this was both feasible and effective, which was I had a container that I had a process running on top of a container that basically wiped the container as soon as I saw anything that was outside of the known state. Okay, known good state. So if someone logged in, okay, and ran who am I, or even tried to run, just ran the command who am I, it would blow away the container. Okay, so the attacker was able to still get into the container, but they could practically do nothing with it because as soon as they tried to do anything that was not what was defined appropriate or useful or allowed, it basically would say, "Oh, that's a like LS." Okay, like a system should not ever have to LS anything inside of a container because you know exactly what's inside the container. Only a user would do that. So as soon as I saw anything like that, we would just blow away the container. So you log in. It's an insecure system. You're able to break in. And as soon as you break in, you do anything that's not what the system is designed to do, and it wipes the system, starts over. So it was maddening for anyone who was trying to do anything because it would get wiped like within seconds of you getting onto the system and trying anything.
It's like playing Operation.
Zap. Yeah, right. Exactly. So anyway, it's not, again, to your point earlier, I don't know there's no guarantee of a secure state anything, right? But I could at least revert to a known good state and constantly blow away the system if it diverges from that.
Yeah. Well. So, like talking about the defending side on this, so that I think, like you alluded to earlier, one of the most interesting components of this story. So, the team said, for one, just to be clear, they did say they had some AI-assisted detection mechanisms that turned them on to this activity. So, behavioral. But then they went on to say that when they were going through logs to figure out what happened, that they kept getting their hands slapped by guardrails on frontier models or a frontier model because they were basically loading in all these exploit strings and all of this exploitation and command and control type activity, and they were constantly getting hit. No, you can't do that. No, you're going against this. And what's funny, and this is just like hyper sophisticated, and I think this is where most security teams would kind of be shamed and want to pretend that they do this too and just leave the room before they get found out. But it was basically like, hey, since our automated process of pulling all of the forensic data and feeding it to a frontier AI model ran into guardrails, we quickly pivoted to our on-prem GLM model that we use on our own hardware. You guys should make sure you all have one of those too. And that's where people are like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And oh my God, I'm such an imposter. So first of all, don't feel bad out there if you're not at that level of sophistication.
Okay. First of all, this is HuggingFace, so I expect him to have. I mean, actually,
but it's a security team, not not the ML team.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean,
I hope so.
When I was talking to folks at OpenAI and Anthropic, they're like, the security team. It's a whole different mindset because you have, like, for them, throwing large volumes of logs. It's like there is no third-party problem for Anthropic. It's like if you're Amazon, AWS is first party, right?
Yeah.
So in many cases with HuggingFace, I mean, they run, they operate some of these things as a service for others too. So I'm not surprised that they have JLM 5.2, fully unquantized or whatever to run locally. So I was somewhat surprised that they didn't turn to that first. The fact that they went with frontier models was a little bit of a head scratcher.
Well, I mean, the adversary went there first. It seems that they didn't use frontier models.
Yeah, I mean, if they did, then there's more guardrails that the frontier models need to create. But yes, I think the perspective of using your open weight models, I think, and unless you're a frontier model provider and you consider the frontier models to be a first party, I think there is going to be a demand for folks to be able to say, hey, I need to be able to send really sensitive content or some kind of content like this at large volumes into an LLM. Let's spin up. Let's have a resource like this internally so we can use it. But there's another part of what you were pointing out that's worth noting, which is that that defenders got refusals, right? And we're trying to defend, and we get these refusals, which really cripples or undermines, obviously, the ability for defenders to do this properly. So one question that I have for the HuggingFace team is: did you not sign up for the trusted access program or the cyber verification program, whatever? There's a couple different variants of that.
Yeah, good question.
But so as a defender, if you haven't already done that, then you should do that. You should go ahead and do that anyway. That gives you the ability to use these commercial frontier models if you choose to do so, and not get the refusals that HuggingFace ran into.
Yeah, right. I mean, the open question, like you said, is did they have that and still got slapped or not? And I think to your earlier point about the sophistication of that program, you would think they did. So I don't know. We'll find out. I mean, there has to be some point where the guardrails are. It can't just be all or nothing. So and if what they're running was really hot there, I could see, they could still run into it. So maybe we'll learn more about that. So I look to bring this topic home for the audience. Is this a watershed moment? Do people need to be worried about AI-enabled attacks now? When people says, "Hell, move to an open source on-prem model," I don't even have AI. Forget about it. I don't have AI-assisted SOC. I don't even have a SOC. I don't even have good logs. I don't have reliable telemetry. When I do have a problem that takes me 6 weeks to even reconstruct it, and then I find out I don't have all the data. Does this just say you better fix all those problems now because you can't keep them for long?
So here's the thing that concerns me to a large degree. This was what appears to be an AI-enabled attack. Was it only discovered because HuggingFace had AI-enabled defenses? If the question of are there AI-enabled attacks, I think the answer is absolutely. There are absolutely autonomous attack harnesses that are being put out there, and people are using them. Are we not hearing about or seeing them, or being able to even distinguish that they are such because we just don't have, because we lack either know-how or these AI-enabled defense tools to help us discover these attacks? I'm hoping, I can be hopeful and say, oh no, there aren't too many agentic AI attacks happening right now. But I just can't believe that that's true, because it's so easy. It's so easy to just throw like an autonomous agent framework an attack framework at an agent, at a large language model and say, go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, I'm tying that back to what you said earlier about like the ability to have success criteria and know when you win. That begets an agentic framework as well, right? Mm-hmm. An actual goal, which really helps with that. And if we're all able to use Claude Code every day to steer us towards some product vision already, then something this specific, you'd be a no-brainer.
And one really important thing to mention, you talked about breach and attack simulation. The way I looked at it when I was at Bank of America was the goal of breach and attack. The primary goal that I had for breach and attack simulation was to evaluate not my response capability, but my detective capability. Did my detective controls even notice the breach or the attacks that were being simulated? So I have a very specific progression, which may not align with how everyone thinks about this, but I look at, for example, vulnerability scanning as a test against my identify controls. Can I proactively identify my vulnerabilities and address them before they become discoverable? Then I look at pen testing as controls against, or tests against my protect capabilities and my protective controls. Then I looked at breach and attack simulation as my mechanism to test my detective controls. I look at red team as my test against my response controls. The response being, once I know an attacker is in there, can I actually kick them out thoroughly, completely? So my red team, in many cases, we just said, here are credentials, go entrench yourself, and blue team, try to kick them out. We'll even tell you where they might be, right? Do what you can to kick them out. Yeah. And red team, of course,
have to go through that.
Yeah, red team, of course, is like just persistence everywhere, entrench yourself everywhere, do things that were really, really hard to get rid of. And the goal was to see what our response was. But anyway, going back to the sequence there, the reason why I mentioned this is your detective controls are what we need to evaluate. And what HuggingFace, I think, really showed us is they clearly had good detective controls, maybe because of the AI defense, AI-enabled defense. But to understand whether or not you actually can defend against that, or that you can see the detective controls light up, is to take your own attack harness and go say, hey, here's my public-facing website. Go attack it and don't stop. And very few of us are willing to let that run on its own like that. But that's essentially what the attacker, I think, has done here. And again, fortunately, HuggingFace found it, but I wouldn't bet that others would have had the same success.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, I think there's something you said for, when you said early on the prominence of HuggingFace, and I'd like to believe that they're on rarefied earth when it comes to the targeting as well, which would be good news for PetSmart or the average company, regardless of revenue. But to your other point, I think this is kind of a bellwether of the tradecraft, and it's going to become part, and it's just a matter of whether people really want to attack you or not. And if that's the case, and the whole world, no less country, will ultimately, anybody who used to be under the ransomware target, which means everyone will now be under this kind of tradecraft, then we can just fast forward and say people are ultimately going to say the government has to get involved. We can't afford or expect to have the kind of sophistication to defend against this. So that brings us to an executive order on the, I don't even want to yell it because I'm in my office and people might think I'm under assault over here, but it's Gold Eagle, screamed really loudly in all capital letters. So what do you know about this Gold Eagle initiative? Are you up to speed on this thing? Did you read about this?
Yeah, I'm pretty, I'm familiar enough with it. The funny thing is when you have a program in all caps, it came from the intelligence community, or it started somewhere in the intelligence community. That's typically the common signal. Anyway, so there were a couple things about Gold Eagle that I thought was interesting. So for those who are not familiar with it, it's in theory an effort to help coordinate the discovery of vulnerabilities, and then subsequently the fixing and maybe even the patching. Who knows? But there were a couple of things that I thought was interesting. One is that there's nothing about the coordinating and the scanning. So it talks about it at the very beginning, but this notion that we have all these people scanning the same repository, same open source software, and no coordination happening, and certainly very little coordination of the reporting process to the maintainers. I would argue that the Acrides project that was launched a couple weeks ago, I guess, we've already kind of started that process. So the question is, where can government actually help here? The government's here to help. Okay, what can you actually do to help? And ultimately, I think we all know this, but discovery is not the constraint. It's never been a constraint. I would argue, even finding patches isn't the constraint. It's always been about fixing, actually implementing the patch. And so we have to go and understand, why are people hesitant to patch? And is there anything that the government has imposed that makes that harder? Okay. And that's the focus area that I would have taken, which is, well, what is it? Where are the inflection points or the pressure points that government can release or help create proper backstops for, to say, look, if you patch something that comes out of this program and your product fails, breaks, blah, 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 then you are released from liability. Okay. That would be wonderful. Some people may die, things will break, things will crash. Yes, we all know that. That's the result of patches. Yeah. But to be released from liability definitely creates releases some pressure here, where right now I think government forces many organizations to have everything recertified or properly validated after any change. Okay, not just a patch, but any change at all. And that again makes sense as to why we'd want to do that. So if the government really wants us to patch things as well with a higher degree of urgency, then it has to correspond with being released from some of the certification that happens after the fact.
Yeah.
Recertification.
I'll play that back and then take it forward from that. So like to me, so with the EO and Project Golden Eagle, the ideas there is there's going to be some central kind of coordination of, hey, we found this critical issue with this code base. Oh, I was scanning it too. Okay, I'll stop now. You already found it. Okay, great. Let's all work together on making sure the vendor's aware or the maintainers, and we get a solution for this. And then the 90% that's left is actually getting that thing out into the wild and into infrastructure, which is a change control problem and not a exploit problem. And I totally agree with you. Like it's so funny. Even when we talk about 0 days, in reality, it's always a 1 day, right? Because there is a patch, right? And part of the story is always, why didn't they patch or they didn't patch yet? But it's very rare that it's, there was no patch at the time it happened. Those things exist, but it's very rare. Not enough to drive this podcast. We wouldn't exist if that was the only problem we were worried about. So I'll rephrase it and say like a better almost like moonshot would be, how do we, when there's issues, make sure that the collective ecosystem can get up to speed with the protections that are available? And you mentioned what I'll rephrase as regulatory relief to some standpoint, like instead of when people rush out and they kind of YOLO change control to some degree, when things break, hey, cut them some slack. I think, of the entities that get penalized for breaking things, I think the place where government has a role in that and where they're currently disincentivizing people from innovating is pretty minimal. In that, like, when I worked in a regulatory environment, if we had an outage, nothing at all to do with cyber, we'd be penalized for that because we had to guarantee a fair and orderly market on a stock exchange. And so if we broke that, we would get our hand slapped for sure. And sometimes that would be as a result of what you could generally call patching. It's, innovation upgrades, code releases, whatever it may be. Had we the ability to say, whoa, I want to cite clause 55B, this was related to security, so back off. And we can't have a cause of action here, SEC or CFTC, because this was related to security. One, I think that would give some perverse incentives for people to automatically, every time there's an issue, start blaming security, and just always a way to do that, But perhaps more importantly, I think the overwhelming majority of hand slapping around change control is not government or regulation born. I think it's either commercial, hey, we're down during Black Friday and we're losing the business, or contractual, right? Which could be, this big customer of mine is going to come after me. So you'd almost have to have this tort injection where you're able in court to say, well, according to this national law, because what I did was related to security, you can't sue me for violating my uptime requirements and my SLAs. Whew, that seems really ripe for abuse and manipulation.
Yeah, I would definitely not suggest that it can't be abused, right? I think that's really what I'm trying to do is characterize a trade-off. And I think the trade-off is, ultimately more evident. It's not just that, hey, why can't you guys apply these patches? There's a whole bunch of other considerations that need to be accounted for. And I have jokingly said, people are going to die. Well, guess what? The people who die are going to care a lot, right? They're going to be like, no, that's
somewhat.
Don't patch. Thank you very much. I need to get my MRI, or I need to get this medical procedure done. How dare you patch in the midst of that, right? But we can understand now, what are the real trade-offs that government can weigh in on, and again, if there are things that the government can truly do that industry can't do, it would be something like this.
Well, anecdote here. I remember circa 1995, maybe, a buddy and I in college formed an LLC. We're doing all kinds of work to pay tuition and so on related to IT. And we went to a school, and part of the statement of work was, it was a public school system, and they said, hey, can you come in? It has to be after hours, so come in on the weekend. The janitor will let you in. I'm not going to see anybody related to us. We have an old Novell system. and it hasn't been backed up in decades, or at least a decade. And because it doesn't have a backup, it doesn't have a tape backup drive. This is before doing over the network was really plausible. So what we want for you guys to do, because this system is so at risk and we're worried about losing all the data, is to install a backup drive in it. So we go in there, and I remember it quite vividly, and it was a desktop format system sitting on top of a desk. And it was kind of like anchored, like built, constructed, formed by dust. Like the whole thing was encased in dust. And so we said, well, let's put in the backup drive. So first thing we did was, power it down. And that was the end of it. We powered it. I mean, we didn't figure it out till we opened the case, put in the backup drive, and I went to power it back up. But once we powered it down, it was done. It's completely done there. That's change control. That's what companies are thinking about when it comes to patching a lot. It's not like, hey, can you give me a get out of jail free card? It's more like, oh, this legacy code base. Oh, do not touch that thing. We fired all those developers 6 years ago. Nobody knows anything about it. It's still generating revenue. I don't care who says it's okay. You will not. That's what patch management is like, or change control, I think, in a lot of organizations. So I'm not sure if the government could do something to help with like the metaphorical projection of that kind of situation writ large across the world.
Yeah, I agree. There's a limit to what government can actually do in some of these cases where it's really an internal corporate decision. But at the end of the day, that is where the constraint exists, right? The change control, the actual change itself, and people's unwillingness to break other things, potentially break other things for the sake of security.
Yeah.
So anyway, all the efforts around vulnerability disclosure and coordination, that's nice. But if you think about what it's called, Goldratz's theory of constraints. So Goldrats indicated he wrote a book. I forget the name of the book, but it's basically the premise that if you try to fix anything besides what's at the constraint, you only exacerbate that constraint. So we're scaling discovery, but remediation isn't scaling. And so you increase discovery, well, it's just going to make the remediation even worse.
Yeah, that seems valid and applicable here. Well, not to let the government off the hook. Next topic on here. So, I'm more ignorant to the CMMC process, not completely, but I forget what it even stands for, but capability maturity model.
Certification.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, why don't you give us a recap of what it was and what changed this year before July 13th and what the state of play was with CMMC?
Okay, so full disclosure as well, I sit on the board of the Cyber AB, which oversees the CMMC certification, the program itself in terms of certifying third-party assessors. So I do have even though I try to remain as independent, as unbiased as possible, there's at least a perception of bias here because it means that I would naturally have a favor towards this program. And
because of how much they pay you.
Yeah, it's a voluntary role.
I wish the rest of the world would realize how these voluntary roles work in cybersecurity. Yes, but yeah, it
is a nonprofit, and it is a notable board position, which I think is kind of interesting. But that's it. Yes, so I have this. There's a natural bent or bias towards it because of my position on here. But I'll try to give as unbiased a view as possible. Because I'm also good friends with the person that suspended the requirements. So anyway, the basic premise here is that if you're doing business with the government or with DoD, then you're supposed to meet certain compliance requirements as it relates to security, specifically NIST 800-171. And this has been in the DFARS, the acquisition language for a long time. It's been there for a long time, but basically companies would say, yep, we're compliant with 800-171, but everyone pretty much realized that they're just lying, right? They're not actually compliant, but they're stating that they're doing so. And so because we all recognize that they're just lying through their teeth, there were a couple of things that needed to happen or that people wanted to have happen. One is to certify, to go through a third-party certification and validate that, yes, this organization is actually meeting those requirements. And as a result, they are eligible for DoD contracts or Department of War contracts. The other sort of perspective is that making such claims makes you susceptible to what's called the False Claims Act. So there's been recent enforcement of the False Claims Act with fines in the millions and millions of dollars against organizations that have claimed that they're compliant to 800-171, but they clearly aren't. And so it's starting to get more teeth into the enforcement side of it. Not just in saying, hey, you can't do business, but you will also get fined as a part of that. So the False Claims Act, or the requirement to meet this level of compliance has not been taken off the books. That's still the case. That's still in force, and you could still be taken to court through the False Claims Act. What has changed here is the actual certification process itself. Should you be pre-certified to say that you adhere to this? Because what's the biggest concern from the White House and from the current leadership in the Pentagon is this whole certification process is potentially too expensive for smaller organizations, smaller manufacturers and such. And there's a huge push to increase our manufacturing capability, especially for building more arms of war arsenal, more to expand our arsenal, right? So it's called the Arsenal of Freedom, and I'm sure no one's surprised by the need for this, right? We're expending lots of armaments in Iran. We've sent a lot to Ukraine, and in the next 2 years, might we have a conflict with China? And so this sort of perspective is driving a perspective of how do we increase our manufacturing capability as quickly as possible, still try to remain as secure as possible, but not over-rotate on compliance, because we know that if I had to spend money on compliance, I'm not spending money on something else, right? And it's not spending money on compliance, it's spending money on the certification that you're compliant versus actually spending, I don't think anyone disagrees that you should try to secure your environment. It's should you spend additional money on getting certified on top of that? That last part is what was suspended, from what I can gather.
Yeah, and being much more ignorant of the process than you, I don't have to worry about tripping over anything. But so when I read it with absolute zero inside knowledge, I detected some color there. Like it was saying, this is rescinded because it's not an effective use of people's time. Which, I mean, you said that in a very diplomatic way as well. But my question for you is, do you feel like the next step out of this is more in the direction of there's natural remedies for this, we didn't need this process, we're in a good direction? Or, yeah, we do need attestation and validation around security of vendors, but this is not a good process, so we're going to create a new one. And just to spell it out, it did say in the release around this that there's going to be a task force for reforming this. Is that reform going to be encouraged to come up with a new version, or to back out of the whole initiative more? What do you think?
I'm not sure if it's, I think it's ultimately to find more cost-effective ways to expedite the whole process while still...
But do you think, like, cost aside, that if people were willing to shoulder all of the costs, that the outcome is benevolent and good? Or do you feel like it's regardless of cost, it's just not a good outcome?
Yeah, let's just, for argument's sake, say, you know what? DoD will reimburse your cost. Okay.
Yeah, right.
They would have to ask for more budget, but I can also imagine the percentage of spend for that would be, a small fraction of our total spend for that department. But let's suppose they could do that, right? Does it remove does it just take it off the table? Yeah, to some degree, it's not really about the cost as much as then it's about, is this actually effective? I think let me give an analogy for those who know, who complain about this as well. It's like SOC 2, right? Let's make SOC 2 free. You can get a SOC 2 for free.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You get a SOC 2, you get a 2. Everyone gets a SOC 2. Okay. Does it really move the needle in any meaningful way?
No. I don't know if that was rhetorical or not. I mean, I'll argue that they are free now. Like the prices come down so much.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And we're going through ours right now, and I'm just disgusted with it. I can't wait till the next cycle to just be the company that says, we're not doing that because it's so dumb, but here's a viable alternative. To me, it's free and still bad.
Yes. So I agree. The price point for a SOC 2 is to drop to it's a race to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom, and you can get one fairly cheaply, but is it worth more than what's on the paper that is written on? And the answer, generally speaking, is you do it because there's a general industry expectation that you have one, but beyond the fact that you have one, there's not much beyond that. And I would say for a SOC 2, for most of what we do, vast majority of what you might think what you do is important and really life changing, whatever. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as much as weapons of war and things that actually can change a lot of geopolitical situations. So now that I've upped the game in some way, right? We now is the notion of a SOC 2, not the actual SOC 2 itself, but something like a SOC 2 where someone comes in and audits you. Everyone gets audited in some meaningful way. Is that a worthwhile exercise when there is more at stake? And so an example would be like medical equipment, right? I would generally want to have medical equipment be assessed, not even sampled. I would want all of them to be tested, right, in some way or another.
Every product, yeah.
And so I think that's really kind of I'm just giving the extreme here, just to say there are things that I think we would say a self-certification is not going to be sufficient. You need somebody else to come in and certify that. So then this gets to the core of what CMMC is all about, which is we're doing this for what's called confidential but unclassified information. So or CUI. So it's not secret information or top secret information. It's just it's specifications on bullets. Okay.
Yeah.
Which in some aggregate form, probably reaches the level of secret, maybe even top secret in some cases. But that's how this type of data is how China ended up building their version of the Joint Strike Fighter that looks identical to ours, right? And so this perspective of what's the right threshold of importance to this are we putting that causes us to treat this like more medical equipment rather than a SOC 2?
Yeah, okay. So I mean, I'd say you definitely answered the question. And it was more, is the threshold about the threshold under which we have to require some kind of attestation, and like I'm more focused on even when you do say this is really important in a material vendor and it matters. I don't know. I mean, certainly SOC 2, but all of and I think but I think a lot of it comes from NIST too. That there's these. Like we're going through SOC 2 and it's, hey, where's the evidence of the fire suppression? And I'm rolling my eyes like that's such a distraction for someone. And I think what would be great, thresholds aside and whether or not this vendor rises to the occasion, once one does, I think the next answer isn't to go to NIST and say, what are the hallmarks of maturity, but rather to red team it and say, oh, okay, we think if this person has, this entity has weak security, then we can lose some data here and it's going to be really important to us. Red team it and do it over and over again. And if you find something, who would argue with fixing it? And if you don't, then that's a pass. And maybe there's something where you rise to the occasion where we're definitely going to buy if you pass that. So now if you want to go forward, you're going to have to submit to red teaming. And maybe if it's just a total disaster and Swiss cheese and you're wasting a lot of time, then you have to foot the bill or something like that. But it has to be threat-based and exploit-based and aligned with the outcome that you're trying to avoid, and not you test my fire suppression system with a questionnaire so you can see whether or not I'm going to get hacked and lose all your data, which is what's going on right now in TPRM.
Yeah, I have a bit of struggle on what you're suggesting, because in some level, even going back to the earlier conversation with the Gold Eagle, discovery of it's just called Gold Eagle. You would think it's called Golden Eagle, but no, it's just Gold Eagle. Weird. Anyway, you would think anyway. The perspective of Gold Eagle is simply that finding vulnerabilities and breaking into your environment is now potentially trivially easy, right? So And if you try to patch everything, will you patch everything? Are there novel things that one will discover? Oh, and by the way, part of the Gold Eagle premise was, hey, let's not rescan the same thing over and over again. I would actually disagree with that. I would say scan the same thing, try different harnesses, and you may find different things. That's exactly what we're finding.
Well, the probabilism AI kind of makes everyone a unique scan.
Yeah, even if you did it twice with the exact same harness, you may end up you're going to definitely get two results. But what we're also discovering is that different harnesses have different levels of you'll end up with potentially higher quality outcomes depending on the harness you use. So I would say, no, scan the same code base multiple times as long as you know that you're coordinating the different harnesses that are being used, and that becomes more interesting. Anyway, my point, though, is that with any sort of the compliance regime only says that you're this tall, but we all recognize that a determined attacker, or just even a basic AI system now, can easily leap over the basic you're this tall threshold.
I don't know. I think that's kind of defeatist, because I mean, to say like, don't test me on red teaming because everybody knows you could break in, then don't use me, because I don't think I think maybe given enough time and resource,
yes,
but there's a spectrum of results from that too. It doesn't have to be binary, and it could be you're really hard to break into, and that's good enough.
Right. And I agree. So I think the basic threshold is with X amount of tokens and with commodity models, okay, can you break in? And the answer is no. Good.
Yeah.
But will that hold up for the next generation frontier model, or even the next generation OSS open weight model?
These things once a year for a reason.
Yeah. The answer is going to be no. It's not going to be good enough. You're going to have to rise to the occasion.
So maybe we finally have a meaningful metric, which is the number of tokens it takes to compromise. And so that will be the new. And let's say, like, for this particular contract, we're expecting a 65 trillion token security posture. We've solved security. Way to go, Sunil. Where's Mario?
Or at least just figure out how to measure it. So,
yeah. Well, great. Yeah, there's no shortage of topics. It's always fun talking. I certainly miss Mario here. Hopefully, Tilson can edit in some what the fudges periodically through here. But otherwise, I hope your summer's going well. And man, I don't know about you, but the next time we talk, my kids might be back in school already. So things are moving fast.
Well, have a good summer otherwise.
Thanks, Sunil. Speak
Cheers.
soon.